got direct access to Yahusha Elohim, Biblically transitioning into our Elohim. Open portal door to Yahusha Elohim. We can hear Yahusha Elohim. Oh, we've got direct access to Yahusha Elohim, Biblically transitioning into our Elohim. Open portal door to Yahusha Elohim. We can hear Yahusha Elohim. We can hear Yahusha Elohim. Whoa, 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 whoa. We can hear Yahusha Elohim. Yahusha Elohim.
The Ten Commandments are history. The Old Covenant is history. The Old Testament is history. It's all historical document, essential reading, but it is old. It has been done away with. It has been fulfilled. It has been completed. Yahusha in himself took on every single portion, part, shadow, teaching. He took it all into himself because he is the living word. Everything that was written and explained and taught back in the Old Testament, he took into himself and he transformed it. He transitioned it into a new living behavior. It was new behavior because prior to him, you didn't have the power to fully, successfully behave the old Torah shadows, the Old Testament, Old Covenant. It was what he was doing with his people, his first wife, as a shadow, as a teaching, as a schoolmaster. We've talked about this so many times, and we did it at the dining discussion last night. Christopher said that the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, the Ten Commandments, all of it encapsulates a historical document. It's done. It's history. Bringing it into today is absolutely ridiculous. And Yahusha knew the people would. Yahusha knew what was going to happen. Bringing it today is just absolutely bonkers, mate. Because it's all about love. The Ten Commands, Yahusha summarized into two. Not just the Ten Commands, the whole Old Covenant, the whole sacrificial system, the tabernacle, temple, all the Torah and prophets hang on these two royal laws. Love Elohim with all your heart, mind, body, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. That is the two royal laws. You can't do those two royal laws, not in your flesh. I mean, you walk around in your day and there are some people who are nicer than others, some people who are gooder than others, happier than others, but in your flesh you can't achieve Yahusha's two royal laws. In your flesh, you can't achieve the 9 fruits of the Spirit either. The love, the joy, the peace, the patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, especially self-control. You can't achieve that. You might be able to achieve one small aspect of self-control in your life, but you've got to sacrifice a lot of other things in your life. You can't achieve Yahusha's version of self-control. You can't achieve any of the 9 fruits without Yahusha's Spirit. His Spirit empowers us. That was what the whole historic book was to point us to. That's why we've got to read it all. But when you're reading it, go, okay, that's how he explained it to them. That's how he explained what he likes, what he doesn't like, what the definition of an abomination is, what righteousness is, what sin is, good and bad, what pleases him, what he loves, what he hates. That you've got to read all the old historic documents to understand. They are inspired, but to bring them to today and live, look, behave, act, all the cultural, all the old shadows, all the Old Testament, all the sacrifices. People who are doing that today are under the influence of the Jews. And the Jews have many different sects, just like Christianity has many different sects and denominations and daughters. Well, the Jews have many different daughters as well. She's behind most things that have happened in the world. Everybody blames Rome, but the Jews are behind that too. So the Jews are behind all of it. So if you're giving honor, esteem to the older brother, they say, you got to respect the older brother because they were there first. They've been holding on to the Torah. They've been holding on to the Old Covenant. Exactly. They've been holding on to the Old Covenant. It's not an everlasting covenant because Israel broke it. The first wife broke it time and time again. They broke it. So he divorced them. He gave them a letter of divorce. It's done. And just in case they didn't get the message, when he was hanging on the torture stake, what was the last words he said? Almost the last words he said. It's finished. All of that. Everything you've done. Everything I did for you. Everything you did back. All the assault, all the abomination, all the in my face, rebuking, testing, trying me, all of it. The Old Covenant, Old Testament, blood, everything, animals. It's all done. And today we're still so stupid, hanging around the old carcass, hanging around the old shadows, thinking, oh, we've got to do them literally. They're essential reading, as we discussed yesterday. You've got to read them, you've got to understand them, and then you have to have the Spirit infusion, which you can't have unless you literally have Yahusha's baptism of Spirit. You don't understand the text. You have no right to throw a scripture up in anybody's face if you don't have his Spirit in you. And don't be fooled, just because you know what the name of Yahusha is, just because you know what the name of Elohim is, doesn't mean you have the right to speak his word. Doesn't mean you have his Spirit. Just because you know his name doesn't mean you have his Spirit, his baptism of Spirit. Doesn't mean you've gone in the narrow gate. Doesn't mean you're on the path of deliverance. And it certainly means you're not going to get his baptism of fire. So you have no right to use his word, especially if you are pointing people back to literal, physical objects and shadows like water cleansing, water baptism, stringing bits of cotton together like tassels, saying that you've got to wear these to remember the Torah. That's old, it's historic. Yahusha replaced the Torah. He replaced it. He has the right to replace it. He brought in something new. Right before he died, he brought in a new covenant. It encapsulated everything of old, transitioned it into something new, and said, this is what you have to behave now. Love Elohim, love your neighbor as yourself. 9 fruits. There's a behavior that I expect for worship, because all that old covenant was a way to worship. It was a way of approach. It was a way of communication. It was a national form of worship. The Hebrews, the Jews, that's how they worship. If you were to ask them how did they worship, they'd say, well, they had to bring their sheep and their goats, and they had a whole sacrificial system based on animal blood, and they had a Torah, they had 10 commandments, they had this, they had that. That's how they worshipped. Worshipped, past tense. Yahusha said, this is now how you worship. Love. 2 royal laws. So Yahusha transitioned it all. He was the living word. He is the living word. He lived it all himself. He showed them. He rebuked them. He drove them out of the temple because, it's not where it was at. He wanted the temple there as a backdrop, but he wanted to show them this is what the temple's for. It's your body. So everything in the old historic document that points to temples and blood and cleansing and oil and power and fire has to be done in this literal temple. Here, this physical temple, our bodies are now the temple. That is a fulfillment. Yahusha proved that in himself, and now he's putting his Spirit into people who want that experience, who want him inside them all the time, who want to take the historic facts and figures, because they were the truth, they are the truth. It's his living word. He wrote it, he left it with us, but what for? Not to bring it into the 21st century, every jot and tittle. That's right, I was telling you about the literal shadows, the water, the tassels that you've got to wear. What were the tassels for? They didn't have that written on their hearts. They had to look at it and go, oh, that's right, I'm supposed to be being obedient. You don't need literal tassels, zits, because you've got the Spirit inside you letting you know, pounding you, whipping you, flogging you, chastising you, Hebrew 12 in you. It's not about physical, literal tassels. It's not about shofars. It's not about baking bread or lighting candlesticks or doing literal feasts. What do the feasts point to? What does the Sabbath day point to? What do the 10 Commandments point to? What do they all point to? Be intelligent, spiritually intelligent. Not dumb, not blind, not goo goo gaga on the milk of the word. A child can learn how to read the text and regurgitate it, vomit it out of them when it suits them. We're not into the milk of the word. We want to mature and take on the meat of the word. The meat is spiritual truth. The meat is transitioning everything old into the new. And Yahushua is cutting the corners in these last days. And if you're not willing to do it, he's going to bypass you. There's a whole generation above me that Yahusha's bypassed. I don't know many people in that generation who are going to make it. And they're all the ones that have looked down on me and my generation with all their wacky hats and beards and shofars and Torahs and instructions and arrogance and knowledge. The disgusting, with such condescension, they've treated our generation. I don't want to treat the younger generation the way my generation has been treated, by all the wacky beardos, by all their knowledge. Their knowledge makes me feel sick. What they've done with the historic documents, what they've done with the historic scriptures, the Old Testament, what they've done with it is disgusting. They've stood in the doorway and they won't let you see what's really going on. It's absolutely disgusting, brothers and sisters, and you should run from it. Don't subject your children to it like I did. It's disgusting. The Torah of sin and death, the 10 Commandments, the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, which has been fulfilled and transformed into something new. Everything that was old is inside the new. It's a new behavior. He doesn't abolish anything. Heaven and earth will not pass away. One jot or one tittle of it, all that Torah and the prophets. He didn't abolish anything. But you've got to understand its place. You've got to understand historic prophetic history. You've got to understand what went down and what's going to happen in the future. We haven't got long to go, and it's time to run. It's time to get the infusion. It's time to get the baptism of spirit, and it's time to get the baptism of fire so that you can be snapped into service, into wilderness waiting and watching. Those are the true watchmen. Those are the true servants, bride of Yahusha Elohim, knowing that he is Elohim. You can't even decide that whether he's Elohim or not. You're in such confusion. Why? Because there's wacky people with beards and tzitzits and all sorts of Torah shadows pointing you back to a historic document saying that's what you've got to do. You just got to do that if you want to be the bride. Just got to do that. That's not true. That comes forward in time because that's the power of his living word. Yahusha is the living word, and he took everything that he wrote to his first bride, to his first wife, I should say. He took everything and transformed it. That comes forward in time. That's how powerful his word is. It transcends all time and space and nations and countries and cultures. His word travels forward in time and meets you in your own culture, in your own language. You don't have to learn how to speak Hebrew. There is one Hebrew word, maybe two, that you need to use. Yahusha Elohim. You should say Yahuah also, because that was the name of the Father before he metamorphed into the Son. So 3 Hebrew words you need to know. That's all. There's no other there's no other purpose to any other Hebrew word coming off your lips. It's not useful. It's not relevant. You don't need it. Yahusha's word meets you in your time and culture, and his word is deliverance. And he is Elohim. Yahusha is Elohim, and that is how you get through the narrow gate. And he makes every text alive to you, every scripture alive to you, every page alive to you. It's not just dead ink like's been pumped into us our whole lives. I've had the word pumped into me my whole life, from church, Christian school, this, that, Christian, Jewish, Messianic, Nazarene. pumped. It's all ink on the page though, with their own translations, with their own influences and commentaries on what it means. It's not true. Without the spirit of Yahusha Elohim, you cannot understand the scriptures. So shut your face. You have no right to speak his word, use his word, post pictures about his word with your lovely sunsets and flowers. You have no right to do that because you have not been through the cauldronic experience. You have not been through the vein. You have not been through the narrow gate. You have not received his spirit or his fire baptism. You are not overcoming or mature. You are a bubby in the text. Anybody, teacher, preacher, pastor, rabbi, whatever they call themselves, they are not qualified to speak or have anything to do with the scripture if they have not been through this spiritual vein. It's a narrow gate. It is supernatural. Hear me. They have no right to impose on you anything, not even a thought, not even an opinion, not even an impression about what the word means. And if you've come under any of those things, if you've been told to go back to 10 Commandments, if you've been told to go back to 𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓, if you've been told to go back to Abraham, if you've been told to go back to circumcision, if you've been told to go back even before that to Noah or Adam, if you've been told to go back, you are being ripped off. You don't have to go back. The word comes forward in time. You don't have to get into a ridiculous Hebrew time machine and go back. It comes forward in time to you because that's the power of his deliverance. The word of his deliverance is that powerful. His word spoke this whole dimension and universe into existence. That's the power of his word. Yahusha sits in all power and authority, ruler of heaven and earth. His word, if we will allow him, if we will step aside, click into his spirit and fire baptism and go through that process, his word will do wonders in our lives. That is where we have to go, brothers and sisters. Run from the old. Everything's been fulfilled. And the couple of things about him coming back that haven't happened yet, we know what's going to happen. We don't know exactly when, but we know what's going to happen. He's fulfilling it all. Get out of the shadows. You're being told and taught by freaks. It's disgusting what they're doing to the word. And they're putting it in print, and they're putting it in song, and they're putting it on posters, and they're pumping it into the world, this old shadow. Why would they want to take us back to the old? That's what the Jews want to do. They want to take us back to the old temple. They're planning and preparing a red heifer. They want to take over bits of the land that is not even theirs because it's all historical. Those prophecies are irrelevant. National, natural, lineage, bloodlines, irrelevant. 12 tribes of Israel, irrelevant. Yahusha found the bride he wants. He's working with them. He doesn't care what nation, what bloodlines in them, doesn't care because it's about a spiritual heart operation. He puts a new heart, not a new bloodline in you. He washes you with the only blood that matters, his blood. It's all about his blood. Can you see how none of that matters anymore? It's not replacement theology. It's not dispensationalism. I'm not dividing up the scriptures and history into certain amounts of time. I'm not doing that at all. I'm just simply saying in the 21st century, that is not relevant. It is not relevant. It has been done away with, all of it. It is now found in real behavior. And you know when you're in the presence of real loving behavior and when you're not. Especially if you've got Yahusha's spirit in you. You know when you're in the presence of love, whether it's being kind or whether it's teaching you a truth, whether it's tough love or soft, gooey, wonderful love. You know when you're in the presence of Yahusha's love. You know it when it's being spoken to you. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. The old covenant is done. Stop taking people back because it's absolutely disgusting. It's abominable. It is the spirit of the abomination of desolation, which is all through the Jews, all through every other religion, and it's all through the Messianic and Nazarene as well. That abomination that wants you to go back to something old and miss out on the new. Miss out on what Yahusha is doing here, now, today. Miss out on his voice, hearing his voice, the true Torah, the true instructions. That was what he took from them, their ability to hear him, to know him, except through chosen prophets and priests. He took that off them as a punishment. Adam and Eve could hear him. Noah could hear him. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob could hear him. Moses could hear him. They could hear his voice. That was the true experience. That was the true Torah. That was the true. That is Yahusha. That is his way. And that is what he is restoring in these last days, so that we will know him, so that we can truly know and feel right. This is so important. This is life or death. This is your deliverance. Yahusha is your deliverance. Yahuah is gone. Stop giving honor and glory and respect and esteem to someone who is not there. It's idolatry, because you are worshipping someone who is not there. He transformed into Yahusha. He brought new commands, new royal laws, new blood. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me the blood isn't new. Tell me the blood doesn't do everything that the old blood, old system, old shadows, old Torahs can't do. His blood changes everything. So it's not just the Old Testament that is historical document. So is the New, because they didn't have it together either. The Gospels were still part of the Old Covenant, because Yahusha did not bring in the New Covenant until the end of the Gospels. And even in the book of Acts, they didn't have it together. There was a wrestle going on, a transition. Those who could see the New Covenant, those who knew Yahusha personally, knew what he'd done, and those like Paul who were struck down and trained for years, trained to understand the new wine. Go back and read everything Yahusha said. The old wine, the new wine, the old garment, the old wineskin, all the things he spoke about. The Spirit, the water, knowing the rain is in it, all these things he spoke about. Understand it from his point of view. Understand what he did. The book of Acts, they didn't have it together either. And eventually, the 12 disciples, apostles, they fizzled out, they died. And John, in the last attempt, wrote to the 7 assemblies, he wrote to them, pleading with them to get it together. They didn't. The Jews won out. The Jews won out. The old shadows, the old carcass won out. And it went underground. It died out. Religion began a few hundred years later. Catholicism, Christianity, Constantine, and we went into dark ages. So never since then, 2,000 years or so, has this truth been around. So you want to lift up the book of Acts in this example and say they had it together? They didn't have it together. They knew the power, but they didn't have the behavior together. So stop quoting the book of Acts. Stop quoting any of it. You all understand that if you read books like Daniel or Revelation, you can't just take it literally. Otherwise you'd be looking for a fight. Where's the dragon? Where's the real dragon? No. What is the dragon? What is this? It's all metaphoric. It's all symbolism. Parabolic. You all know that when you read, cosmic books like Daniel and Revelation. What if I told you have to have that approach, abstract discernment, to the whole book? From Genesis to Revelation, you have to read it with the same kind of, it's not a literal dragon. It's not literal water. It's not literal this. It's not literal that. What is it for me today in the 21st century? It's hot as hell out here, and that is enough for today. My camera's about to shut down. It's so hot. Welcome to summer in Cairns, Australia. I love you, brothers and sisters. Run to Yahusha. It's disgusting what you've been subjected to. Don't put up with it anymore. Run from the teachers, preachers, pastors, rabbis, and run to Yahusha. He will open his narrow gate to you because you face and you realize you can see that he is Elohim seated on the throne. He will fling open the gates, the narrow gate to you. He will baptize you in his spirit. He will baptize you in his fire and prepare you for his coming, which is only in a couple of years, guys. You've got to get it together. Love you guys. Run.
We've got direct access to Yahusha Elohim, by the transitioning into our Elohim. Open portal door can hear Yahusha Elohim. Oh, we've got direct access to Yahusha Elohim. By belief transitioning into our Elohim. Open portal door to Yahusha Elohim. We can hear Yahusha Elohim.